So here we are for my chapter 1042 first read reaction. Thank you guys for your patience with me over the past few weeks. I was dealing with something really important to me and I'm finally gathering my focus again. And then chapter 1042 dropped a few hours early. This is kind of crazy timing because this is the perfect thing for me to jump back on the horse. If you're new to my channel, the way I view the world is by making connections. So let me connect you to my vision, the ParVision. So the chapter title tentatively is Winners Shouldn't Need Rationalizations, which is so ironic given what happens in this chapter. If you guys heard my chapter 1041 first read reaction, it seems like I predicted this chapter and I had this feeling ever since me and BDA Law sat down and talked in the beginning of the year. It's crazy how conversations with friends from 3 months ago can come back to relevancy like this. But yeah, here we go. First of all, I think it's time to say that I'm on board with people saying that the cover stories should be adapted into fillers for the anime. But anyways, with this cover story, the most interesting thing so far is that this book that Oven is taking seems to be specifically for the Vinsmokes and Germa 66. That's an interesting thing. I wonder though, with this cover story with the squad seeming to enter the mirror world, I wonder if the Big Mom pirates will find out that Big Mom lost and maybe this is where Big Mom escapes to after she was defeated on Onigashima. So starting with the chapter itself, boom, we get this scene I was anticipating with Drake showing his value. But no, Oda couldn't even give Drake this. Apparently the CP0 member got stabbed and then blitzed off of Drake's sword and did a finger gun right to Drake's throat. I wonder if this means that Drake loses his voice after this. And then it cuts away to the fire festival. So these lanterns with wishes are going to be important for sure. This is like the 4th or 5th time these lanterns have been emphasized and we've gotten updates on them. And we got the exclamation of "make your dreams fly." Remember my balloon terminal parallel I made in a previous chapter reaction? Keep that in the back of your mind because I swear if these lanterns end up helping hold up Onigashima as it falls or crumbles, I'm gonna lose it. Just another thing that popped into my head was the possibility that these essentially skyboats will help carry people off of Onigashima. The whole thematic of this festival celebrating the dead and the samurai resolving themselves to die before this war, but then being saved by the wishes of the citizens would be really heartwarming. Which is interesting considering what we left off Luffy and Kaido was the whole thing where Luffy was saying screw Kaido's dreams because it resulted in people being starved and die. And so then we cut to Luffy versus Kaido on the rooftop. Last we saw of Luffy, we saw a lion shadow looking Gear 4 Snake Man Hydra, and now Luffy is in Bounce Man, but it's like Bounce Man plus Snake Man? Like Luffy is doing the Hydra attack but with the enlarged body, so is this Luffy combining the forms even more than before? It looks like Kaido is attempting to counter Luffy's barrage of blows, but still manages to get hit. But then we get into an interesting line where Kaido questions Luffy's fruit essentially. He goes, "Rubber shouldn't be able to do this." We'll wait for the official translations, but now that the Gorosei have announced their orders to take Luffy out, and then on top of them saying that they renamed a specific fruit, and the Gomu Gomu no Mi was originally in their possession, it now feels like the evidence is piling up that maybe it is actually Luffy's fruit that isn't actually the rubber fruit. I know there are some wild and interesting theories, but I want to throw out the part of mine that I'm starting to think about. Remember the Bishi Bishi no Mi that I talked about with Tama's fruit? That one essentially being able to throw out commands? Maybe that one could apply to Luffy in that he is able to command his own body. Maybe being hit by Luffy's punches applies stacks of dominance, so to say, and slowly turns Luffy's enemies into allies or people who listen to him. Just throwing that idea out there. But recently, and I talked about this in the stream with Mosh, that it kind of feels like Luffy might have a semi-Kikan fruit, like basically automatic hacks for semi-Kikan, which is a naturally attainable power, but Luffy is able to access the upper limits of it automatically. And I'm going to be pondering this idea and potentially include this in the Luffy video that's coming down the pipeline soon. But I don't know why this panel in 1042 reminded me of how Luffy commands his Python in Gear 4, something that we still kind of don't have an answer for. Like Luffy talking to himself and commanding his own body is kind of a weird detail that should be explained. So that happened in chapter 784, and what's interesting is in the fight with Doflamingo also questioned if Luffy was actually made of rubber. Have we been getting hints this whole time that Luffy isn't actually a rubber man? But this is the part that is definitely interesting, right? Luffy goes, "Keep chasing him, Python," and then we see Luffy's arm bouncing sporadically towards Doflamingo, and then Doffy says he's not shrinking, which is, yeah, interesting. Normally, Luffy would need to wind back up after making a motion like this, and his movements have always been momentum based. Like Luffy throws his weight into a direction and the power gets translated into a linear direction. But with this move, he is able to break linear momentum, and it's like he is commanding his own body. Also, again in the fight against Katakuri, Luffy tells Python to chase Katakuri. I know it's not a new discovery, but it is interesting, and I think it does tie back to chapter 1042 in the sense of it, Luffy is breaking the logic of being a rubber man. But then this is the primary move I'd like to look at because it's the one that is the biggest outlier. It's the only move where Luffy breaks momentum illogically and continues to stretch despite it not making sense. It's like his arms are bouncing off invisible walls, which would mean it requires an awakening to work maybe? But then Luffy is commanding his Python. I mean, us guys are always commanding our Pythons, but this is a little different than that, right? But okay, going back to chapter 1042, we get an interesting sequence of events where Kaido continues to debut new drunk modes like flirtatious and then homicidal, but during this he demonstrates his future sight prowess, which I want to emphasize here. Kaido did this while in his flirtatious drunk phase, and we know that future sight requires some sort of emotional command but also calmness, so that means during this fight, Kaido is able to be drunk and emotionally aware and calm enough to foresee Luffy's Hydra attack. Also, this makes me question, can Kaido only access this power during this state of mind, or has he been holding back on his future sight this whole time, allowing Luffy to actually just hit him? This is another point that I emphasized last chapter, that Kaido definitely is holding cards. Being able to use future sight almost feels small in comparison to what might come next. Luffy is on the last legs of the fight, it feels like, and so maybe this is when the idea is that Luffy doesn't finish Kaido alone, or gets some kind of external boost to aid him comes into play. In Thriller Bark, for example, we got the temporary one-time boost of the 100 Shadows Luffy. If Luffy is a life return human or consumed the semi-Kikon fruit, then maybe we see something crazy again where Luffy stuffs himself and gains an immense power-up. Maybe that's the true nature of this Gear 4 as we see a little bit later in the chapter. I'm not too sure what thieving drunk phase means, but looks like he wanted to steal a bite out of Luffy. Man's ate Luffy. Honestly, this I thought was going to be his undoing. I was thinking, damn, Luffy should have just let loose while inside of Kaido. Like, imagine if Luffy commanded his Python to destroy Kaido internally. For a lot of reasons, that would have had Kaido sweating for sure. But so Kaido wanted to take Luffy on a ride and then slam him down into Onigashima and almost destroyed the island again with his Boro breath. I'm surprised the island withstood this, to be honest. It withstood Law's attack and then that explosion that Big Mom triggered. But Luffy is able to rebound and fly back up to face Kaido, and this is an interesting dialogue. Luffy blurts out that he doesn't have much time left. This seems pretty odd given that he's just telling Kaido his strategic weakness. If Kaido wanted to, he could just stall out the fight. And what's interesting is that another interesting quirk about Gear 4 that I noticed back in the Katakuri fight in chapter 895 is that Luffy says that he basically has to just straight up announce everything on his mind. He feels better that way. I wonder what Luffy is dealing with internally for this to happen. And so far, I don't know if this chapter will need a deep analysis, but we do get some heavier dialogue that I want to wait for the official translations for, but we get to the title of the chapter where Kaido proclaims that winners shouldn't need rationalizations. This whole dialogue, though, is really interesting because it does play into my hockey theory and might indicate why the samurai, though isolated, are actually pretty strong as a nation in comparison to other nations. It seems like the idea that's being played out, though, is that people who are able to persevere are truly strong. Following that, Luffy clocks Kaido with a new move. It seems to be a bigger King Kong gun coated in Rio and Conqueror's Haki, naming it tentatively, pending the official translations, the Supreme Kong Gun. This is where Luffy's strategic weakness comes into play. He's so eager to continue the fight because he's running out of Gear 4, and this causes him to rush into Kaido blindly and allow Luffy to get smacked right back by Thunder Bagua. And then we get an interesting panel. Luffy lets out air out of him and then holds his mouth and says he can't let any escape, otherwise he will lose power? I wonder if it's just the air inside of him, or if this relates back to the whole stuffing him with shadows. Remember that time Luffy drank a bunch of water to fight Crocodile? I wonder if there's a trend here about Luffy reinforcing his internals with something. I just think it's interesting that it seems like his Gear 4th seems more reliant on what's in him rather than his rubber properties or even his haki. Pending official translations, he is saying that this release of air or smoke is making him lose power. It's another interesting indication towards something special for Luffy. This is what I was talking about before, and this is probably another clue as to what Luffy's true power is, or what the nature of it is at least. It does remind me of the Moria Shadow Luffy that we saw, but also makes me think of Mosh's idea that Luffy could inhale fire possibly, and create some new form, possibly Gear 5. I think that would be way more volatile but extremely interesting. And then we get to it. The interesting part from last chapter and earlier in this chapter, this CP0 that just fought Izo and Drake and got the orders to take out Luffy and interrupt the Kaido fight shows up. I just want to pause and say that the other CP0 member in that room relaying the Gorosei's orders is so whack. What is he even good for? This CP0 mask guy is the MVP, hard carry, literally has to do everything on his own. Apparently he washed Drake after getting stabbed and made it to the rooftop already? So Kaido is mid-swing and CP0 distracted Luffy long enough for Kaido's attack to hit Luffy while his guard was dropped, and Kaido has flashbacks to exactly what I said to his fight with Oden, which if we remember what happened after, that means the CP0 member is so dead. We are either going to get a situation like Katakuri and Luffy where they both deal with the nuisance that disrupted their fight, or Kaido will take it upon himself to eradicate this dude. I want to see Kaido just wipe this guy off the face of the planet. Also, to be fair, Luffy has tanked Kaido's hits before, so I feel like Luffy should recover here, but it's just crazy because I said this in the last chapter's reaction, but also in my conversation with BDA Law back in January. I was already saying this Kaido and Luffy fight was reminding me of the Katakuri fight, and Brago was vaguely saying that we might see Kaido help Luffy against the world government, and it's just funny we are actually seeing that so soon. I wonder if Kaido will give Luffy a free shot like Katakuri did. But we can see the turmoil on Kaido's face. He is having PTSD, and this is where the irony comes in. Depending on the chapter title, winners don't need rationalizations. And here we are where if Kaido wins yet again, one of the only fights he has ever enjoyed due to a technicality, and his winning would need to have a rationalization. It directly counters what he said, and to him it probably feels like he can't ever finish his own opponents or his own fights. He always needs some sort of help. So this chapter was really interesting progress. There's so much going on, and I'm not sure if you got a chance to see my tweets earlier, but I stumbled upon a panel that I thought was interesting, and I think it might make sense to include it here. Given that Luffy is disadvantaged and has a time limit, I was thinking, is there a world where Luffy beats Kaido, but Kaido is not taken out? Similar to literally all the previous major villains Luffy has fought. They've never died. Just they were incapacitated or too fatigued to get back up. So if there is a world where Luffy beats Kaido but doesn't finish him, that's when Momonosuke and possibly Hiyori will be the final executioners to Kaido, fulfilling Oden's revenge. And the reason why was this panel from 972, where when Toki was reading the letter that Oden left her since he was sentenced to death, and Oden foretells of this future war 20 years later that would take place on Wano with primary figures of this great war muscling their way into the new world, then he says they are the ones who can strike down Kaido. We know who the primary figures are. That's the 3 captains and their crews, basically the people on the rooftop against Big Mom and Kaido. I just found it interesting that when Oda wrote, they are the ones who can strike down Kaido, Oda chose to show us Momonosuke and Hiyori. And that's important because last chapter, it was final confirmation that Hiyori is in fact on Onigashima, and she probably possesses the Ame no Habakiri, Oden's other sword. And now that Momonosuke is older and has the innate strength of a dragon because of his Zoan fruit, along with all the sword training he has done in the last few arcs, and he's also witnessing some of the greatest swords masters the One Piece world has to offer. And none of this would have amounted to much since he was still an 8-year-old boy before this, but now he has all these cards working for him. He has the adult strength and the training and the experience and Odin's blood and a Zoan fruit that's as strong as Kaido's. It just makes sense that maybe he is strong enough to deal some sort of meaningful blow. There might be a world where we basically get a Goku Gohan father-son final attack display where Momo with Odin's old sword uses a special technique attack that lands the final blow to Kaido. Also, this feels like the case since several times we've seen Momo training his sword technique and learning, and yet he has never attacked anyone with a sword yet. There might be no better time than to deal the final blow that Luffy sets up and giving Momo the confidence to lead Wano as the next Shogun. In any case, that's just an idea that I had based off of a panel that I saw, but I'm not too sure yet about what might happen. I hope you all enjoyed this chapter 1042 first read reaction. Thank you again to everyone who has and is supporting me. I also want to announce that I'm seriously planning on streaming on Twitch soon, so make sure to follow me there to get notified if I ever do a random test stream or fun stream. I really want to start making some connections with you all and maybe make some friends too. And so, like always, thank you for connecting with me, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you all on the next ParVision.